have to be agile. Go with the flow. The most amazing part of, I don't know if anybody saw The Matrix, but some of the movie effects that were just wowing was when, the guy shot the bullets and he ducked the bullets like this. And we were like, I don't know about you, I was like, oh, wow! Right? I was like, wow! All he did was like bend back, But he was agile, right? So he needed to be agile. I also need for you to recognize that whatever you can say about another so-called group of people, you can probably say about your own group. Whatever positive or negative things that you hear about somebody else's group can probably be applied to your own group. Right? Anybody have a thief in your family? Oh, come on! My family's not the only one, right? Anybody got a drunk in their family, right? Anybody who has somebody who's embarrassingly successful in their family, right? Everybody compares, you should be like John. I don't want to be like John. That can apply to all of us, right? So let's go to page 4. Oh, I did want to point out that there's a couple of ways to kind of think about people. And this goes back to trauma-informed care, right? So many of us have been exposed to trauma-informed care. E pluribus unum, what is that? Where can this be found? On money, on the U.S. money, right? And it means what? Yes, but there's two ways to interpret that. One is e pluribus unum, which is us versus them. Right? Out of many, one. There's another way to think about e pluribus unum, which is us and them, which is one out of many. Right? And so however you choose to see your relationships with other cultures will determine your level of agility. So we know that Yuri Bronfenbrenner is the father of Head Start. If people are familiar with Head Start, love it. Was a student myself. I appreciate the learning opportunities that it offered me. And so he talks about these systems, these external systems that impact the individual. So feel free to look at that at your leisure in more detail. I did want to get to cultural agility. Refers to the ability of an organization and its members to understand, incorporate, and successfully work within and between multiple different cultural contexts. Right? So we've already kind of expressed that in our conversations. And then that's how you develop some cultural agility. It's in your handout. What I'd like for you to do is to pay attention to that chart at the bottom of that page, page 4. And what I'd like you to do is to think about your growing up. Think about your growing up, how you developed in whatever time frame works for you, whatever time frame you want to use. And what I'd like for you to do is tell me what the groups on the left, so parents, family, friends, school and workplace, TV, movies, and media, and personal experience, told you about the world you were growing up in, you were living in. And I want you to do it in a particular kind of way. So tell me what they told you about African Americans, European Americans, Latina Americans, Asian Americans, disabled Americans, and Native Americans. I know that there could be others that could be added or should be added, but I think you'll get the sense of the principle of this activity. And so what I'd like for you to do is I want you to put a plus in the corresponding box where they taught or said something positive. I want you to put a minus in the corresponding box where they said or they taught something that you believe was negative. And if it was never anything that was talked about or people were neutral about, you thought they were neutral, I want you to put a 0 in that particular area, right? So you can have pluses, minuses, and zeros. You can have pluses and minuses in the same box, but the size matters. So a small minus means you learned a little bit of negative. A big plus means you learned a lot of positive, all right? So pluses, minuses, and zeros. So for example, for African Americans, in my family there was a plus. For European Americans, it may have been a negative. Friends was 0, so forth and so on, right? So I'll give you just about 5 minutes to do that. pluses, minuses, and zeros. You have just a couple more minutes. You won't finish the whole thing. All right, stop right where you are. You can finish the rest on your own. What I'd like for you to do is to get in groups of 4 that are different than the groups of 2 you were with before. So somehow change that up, get into new groups of 4, and please share your pluses, your minuses, and your zeros. Share what you want to. You don't have to share what you don't want to. We'll come back together in 7 minutes. 2-minute warning, 2-minute warning. Four, three, two, one. So I'm going to say thank you so much for sharing with your colleagues some of your personal stories. So I'm curious, as you were talking about your pluses, minuses, and zeros, were there any thoughts that came up for you as you were going through the process of looking at your pluses, minuses, and zeros? Is there any thought processes or emotions that may have come up for folks? So as you're thinking about pluses, minuses, and zeros, were there any emotions or particular thoughts that were arising as you were going through that? And what were those thoughts or emotions? Yes?
I wondered why disabled had to be Americans.
Okay, cool, yeah. Yep, so there could be people who are disabled that aren't Americans, right? Can anyone tell me why these were selected the way they're written? These are protected classes. So as written, they're protected class, federally protected classes, but we can talk more about that another time. Too. Other thoughts as you were going through pluses, minuses, and zeros?
One thought that I had was, I noticed, for example, how growing up, how, let's say, how my family's perception of one group and the media's perception of one group, if media is not different.
Okay. So if you're going to talk about one specific group, don't leave us on a cliffhanger. Just tell us what the group was.
For example, Native Americans on TV.
Okay, great. Great. So growing up, there was these things that were supported by TV and movie that people thought.
Right.
Okay, cool. Other folks? Yes.
I was trying to evaluate it, not remembering being exposed or talking about certain groups was a good or bad thing. Like, how come I can't think of situations?
Did anybody else fall into that category where you're actually thinking, you know what, we really never talked about that, and I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing? Anybody else experience? Okay, cool. So you're not by yourself, so I don't want you to feel isolated, because typically that's a lot of people feel that way, right? So my daughter is 5, and so she comes up to me and she says, Dad, you're brown. You're black, right? So she's trying to figure out this thing, and she said, yeah, you are. And so my wife is American Indian, so she's a Assiniboine from Montana, and she was like, Mom, you're white, you're pink, and so my wife was like, yeah, I am, right? And so we said, so what are you? And she looks at herself and she says, I'm skinny. And she was right. She did. Right? So it's clear that we have to have more conversations about something, about racial constructs and that kind of stuff. I would rather not have more conversations about it, but she is in a world where that is a thing. So we have to talk about it, because if we don't talk about it, how will she grow up? She will grow up thinking that she is what? Skinny, and she is, right? But for other folks, they won't know what she's talking about, right? So oftentimes, where we grew up, how we grew up, there are certain things we didn't talk about, and that's a decision, that's a choice, and that creates meaning. When you don't talk about something, it creates meaning. So what are some of the things that we're not supposed to talk about? Weight. What else are we not supposed to talk about? Age. What else? Money, sex, religion, political affiliation. Those are all things we're not supposed to talk about. How many of those things impact decisions that you make every day? But that's the stuff we're not supposed to talk. That's the most important stuff, but we're not supposed to talk about that. Why? Because it makes some people uncomfortable. People haven't had that conversation. Now, I don't know if people are familiar with the book White Fragility. I don't particularly like the title. I don't think it's a helpful title. I don't think the lead into that is helpful for folks who aren't already moved in a direction of understanding that. But one of the things that the book suggests is that there are groups of people, majority of white people, who have not or don't have to think about certain particular kinds of things, for example, race, right? Because they haven't had to do it. And so being challenged with that causes them a level of stress. So one way to get over that level of stress is to think about it and to talk about it, right? So in my household, when I was growing up, it was money and sex. Those are the things we didn't talk about. So that I don't have those same kind of confusions and problems in my household, guess what we talk about in my household? We talk about money and we talk about sex, right? My daughter was, if you don't mind me just peeking into my family life, she was telling me about, we were talking about private parts, and we were talking about animals, mating, and that kind of stuff. And she says, ooh, private parts, yucky. I was like, no, it's not yucky. It's natural, it's good, it's a part of life and anatomy, and we call things by their anatomical names in my house, which makes my kid weird when she goes to school, wee, no, that's, anyway. So, but I'm trying to head off some stuff, right? So when we think about that, I want you to think about all of this stuff, because what you were taught or what you weren't taught, the conversations you did have or you didn't have, are not your fault. They're not your fault. Anybody drive a car? Does a car have a blind spot? Where typically are those blind spots? Behind you, on the side, in the front. And if you drive a Hummer, the whole thing is a blind spot. Right? It is not your fault. However, it is your what? Responsibility. Right? So the blind spots that you have, the biases that you have, the culture that you grew up in, that you only can know about, right, is not your fault, but it is your responsibility to do something with it and about it. Right? And so when we think about this idea of cultural agility, acceptance, what does acceptance look like? How does one know one is accepted? When you feel comfortable in a situation, but what if you never feel comfortable in a situation? Because I spend the majority of my life in uncomfortable situations. I live in Rochester. I used to live in Anoka, which was different, but right? So what does acceptance look like? Practically. You've been accepted by something or someone. How did you know you were accepted? You may have gotten a job offer letter, right? So keep job offer letters in your pocket. Right? What else? When you can be your authentic self, your best authentic self. Some of y'all's authenticity I don't want to see in the workplace. Right? Your best authentic self. You're listened to. Right? People don't even have to understand you. They don't have to agree with you, but they at least have to listen to you.
If someone else's experience, it's not yours or it's different from yours, you don't understand it, that's yours.
If someone tells you something and you start out with, no, that didn't happen, you're not accepting. I don't care what you think you are, right? So acceptance starts with just taking things at prima facie, taking it at face value. Right? Adaptation is as context change, and it's always changing, we adapt the best we can. I'm old now. I'm 50. I'm old. There are some things I'm just not going to get that this new generation is getting. Like the game controllers, the Microsoft One or whatever. It's got 45 buttons. I'm not getting with that button, but that's not necessary, right? But I can adapt, right? I can adapt, but I can't do all the 50 buttons on the thing. I don't know if anybody's ever seen that. And they wonder why kids have attention deficit disorder, right? All right. And lastly is this idea of integration. I showed a picture earlier of Brown versus Board of Education in Topeka, Kansas. And the problem with our version of integration is what happened. So integration was supposed to happen. What does integration mean? Who becoming one? Everybody becoming one. We're integrated together, right? What actually happened?
Few people don't, isn't that?
Everybody, we're going to be, what's the problem with the scenario? We're going to be integrated. Only one side is moving. So when we talk about real integration, we talk about both moving together, right? Anybody bused to a school? I was bused to a school across town so that we could be integrated. But true integration means that we come together. On the bottom of page 5, there are some examples of integration. And when does integration actually happen? Out of those, if you number those 1, 2, 3 on the top, 4, 5, 6 on the bottom, when does true integration happen? When there's no tape. Right? When there's no tape. The top of our intelligence is colorblind. The top of our intelligence is that the best we can shoot for is to be colorblind. I would suggest no. I would say that we can shoot for being color conscious. That we make sure that we think about that as an aspect of who people are, right? So I meet a Hmong brother or sister, or meet a European brother or sister with red hair. Those are features, those are things that I have to be conscious of, right? I have to be conscious of those things. And then next is tolerance. That's the other thing. Is tolerance the top of our intelligence? I would suggest that it is not. Do you have a family member that you tolerate? For how long? Until the visit is over. right? And then you can go back to your corners. And I don't think that our diversity is, the diversity of our communities or workplaces are anywhere near that. I know I'm a little bit over time, but I just want to close these last two pieces out. On page 7 is a self-assessment that you can take. The last concept that I want to give you that's a very practical concept of how you walk this out is with this idea of doing face work, helping people to save face, right? And so when we talk about cultural agility, how do we organize ourselves in order for people to save face? And face is a person's sense of favorable self-worth or self-image experienced during communicative situations. And so this idea of saving face is really in this domain of ethno-relative strategies, those cultural agility pieces. And so we seek to be effective more than we seek to be right. Right? I gave an example of that earlier. We recognize that relationship is more important than the rules oftentimes, particularly when we're working with people who haven't been, cultural groups that haven't been a part of the so-called mainstream, that it's important to build those relationships, and that we focus on goals more than we do motives, right? So why are people doing this? They keep coming for these services. Why are they doing that? It's more important to recognize how do we point towards goals than we spend on time looking at motives. And then lastly, how do you do more? How do you move past, and how do you become a person who is working on building cultural agility? Here are some tips. So learn more about your own immigration story. And I put that in quotations because some of us were already here, some of us were brought here, and some of us came here, right? So whatever that story is, learn more about that. Research your family stories. Find family names for family photos. There are tons of photos that I have, and I don't know who these people are, but I know that they're family. And it would be helpful for me to know more about myself if I was to do that. And why are these strategies good strategies to do for yourself? Because if you can do them for you, you're much more lenient as people do it for themselves. Right? And so we started off talking about privilege and power. We all have privilege and power. And what I would suggest is that we think about how we use that privilege and power for other folks. My name is Andre Koen. Thank you so much for your time. And I'm sorry I went over. Any questions, comments, observations? We'll go to 3 o'clock, right? Yeah, that's okay. Okay, cool. I just want to make sure. Any questions, comments, observations? Great. Okay. Helpful stuff? Did you get stuff that you can use that's helpful? Okay, cool. And nobody went to sleep. I was really excited about that after the macaroni and the greens and the cornbread. So very cool. Thank you so much. I know.